From the Midwest, we then travel down to Goshen, Virginia, around the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. The date is now October 14th, about a week after our visit to 765. We are now on the Buckingham Branch Railroad, a third-class regional railroad operated in the state of Virginia. The railroad operates 4 different disconnected divisions across the state, and the one we'll be visiting a portion of is the Richmond and Allegheny Railroad. The RNA division runs from Richmond, Virginia, all the way to Clifton Forge, Virginia, over Chesapeake and Ohio trackage. The line itself is owned by CSX Transportation and is leased to the BB. In 2022, the BB began operations of the Virginia Scenic Railway, a tourist operation which operated 2 excursion trains out of Staunton, Virginia. In late 2023, it was announced that Norfolk and Western 611 would visit the railroad and run the Shenandoah Valley Limited, a special new excursion train which ran from Goshen to Staunton, Virginia and returned. On this trip, my dad and I had traveled down to Goshen to see 611. Here in the small town, there is an industrial siding that splits off the main line to serve some industries here. Over the summer, in conjunction with the Virginia Museum of Transportation, a new siding off the industrial track was built called Victoria Station and was where the new Shenandoah Valley Limited would depart from. Unlike on the trips with 765 earlier, at both Goshen and Staunton, there are no places for the train to be turned around at. So, 2 diesels were assigned to pull the train back when it reached Staunton and also to pull the train out of Goshen when it was ready to depart. The 2 diesels assigned to the run were BB 13 and 7. 13 is a rebuilt EMD GP40-3, built in 1967, originally for the Milwaukee Road, as their 158. Number 7 is a regular EMD GP40, built in 1966, originally for the Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad, as their 3062. Now, let's get to the other end of the train and see the Mighty J. Norfolk and Western 611 is a Class J 484, built on May 29, 1950. It was built by the Norfolk and Western Railway at their own Roanoke shops and was one of 14 484s built for the railroad. 611, along with its sibling locomotives, were assigned to pull many of the Norfolk and Western's flagship premier passenger trains, such as the Powhatan Arrow, the Pocahontas, the Cavalier, and many others across the system. In 1959, 611 was retired from the railroad, and by 1963, the engine was donated to the city of Roanoke and put on display at the Virginia Museum of Transportation. It stayed on display there until 1981, when the engine was pulled out of the museum and restored to operate for the Southern Railway Steam Program, which shortly became Norfolk Southern's steam program when the Southern Railway and the Norfolk and Western Railway merged in 1982. On July 5, 1982, the engine was fired up, and from 1982 till 1994, 611 pulled many excursion trains across the Norfolk Southern system. Sadly, it all came to an end in 94 when Norfolk Southern announced an abrupt end to the steam program. In 1995, 611 was given back to the Virginia Museum of Transportation and put back on display at the museum. It sat on display again at the museum until 2014, when once again it was pulled out for restoration for Norfolk Southern's new 21st century steam program. It was moved down to the North Carolina Transportation Museum for restoration, and in 2015 the engine once again rolled under her own power. Ever since then, the engine has pulled many runs across Norfolk Southern, the Strasburg Railroad, and now the Buckingham Branch Railroad. As the crew of 611 got her ready for her first run of the day, we decided to scout ahead for a good spot to watch the departure. As we were leaving, 7 and 13 were given permission to get a head start on the train and get to Staunton. The first place we got set up at was along Maury River Road. Here, the road provides access for a great shot of trains crossing the Calfpasture River as they either leave or enter Goshen. The road is also next to the Goshen Carnival grounds, where it also provided a great shot of 611 as she began to push her train out onto the main line.
12 cars, 1-2, J611, over. About 8 on Main Street now, 8 J611, over. Cars, J611, over. Understand Main Street crossing protected, clear. Let's make it 30-30, J611, over. Understand. Crossing clear and protected. Good for 30, 30, J611, over. Cars, 25, J611, over.
As the train makes its way out onto the main line, let's now turn our attention to the railroad bridge that crosses Calfpasture Creek. We'll now watch as 611 begins her journey to Staunton by crossing over the river of Calfpasture. In case you didn't notice, the day we saw 611 began as a cloudy, wet day with some scattered rain coming and going, and it had rained that very morning. The line the J is traveling is a hilly line with many grades to climb, and with the rain and possible leaves on the line, the crew would have their work cut out for them. The next place we saw the train at was at the Railroad Avenue / 687 Railroad crossing southwest of Craigsville, Virginia. The next place we saw the train at was at the Eschling Valley Road / Road 601 railroad crossing in Augusta Springs, Virginia. Going from Goshen to Craigsville, the railroad gradient is around 1% going uphill, with a short 1.5% gradient going downhill into Craigsville. Once past Craigsville, the gradient steepens to around 1.5% again and stays around there till it reaches the summit. The summit of the grade is around 5 miles up the line from this railroad crossing. Soon we heard the sounds of a hard-working jay in the distance and got set up to watch as 611 battled the gradient to the summit. The next place we saw the train at was somewhere in the woods between Augusta Springs and Buffalo Gap, Virginia. Between the two towns, the Little Capasture Highway / Road 42 follows closely to the railroad, providing some great shots of the trains traveling through the woods. Once we got out of the woods, the next place we caught 611 was along Hewitt Road, southeast of Buffalo Gap, Virginia. We have now arrived at the beautiful Staunton station in the station's namesake town. The station complex was built in 1902 by the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad and was designed by Thomas Joseph Collins. Both the passenger station, the freight house, and HD cabin still stand, and the station is served by Amtrak's Cardinal. This is also the starting place for the Virginia Scenic Railway's Blue Ridge Flyer and the Allegheny Special. When we arrived, 611 and its train had stopped just around the bend east of the station, just out of sight. We then got to watch as BB 13 and 7 then came past the station platform. They will now couple up to the train and take it back to Goshen. A unique part of this station is the Sears Hill Bridge, which connects the citizens of Cedar Hill to the rest of the town. It also makes for a great place to watch as the excursion train makes its way back to Goshen, with 7 leading the way.
G.
After the train left, we then had lunch at the Depot Grill, which is housed in the old freight house. If you're ever visiting Staunton and need a place to eat, I would recommend this place. Their food here is delicious. After lunch, we then drove back to Goshen for round 2. We got set up on the Main Street / Virginia 39 Alternative Road railroad crossing. Right on the main line next to Main Street is the Goshen Depot. Just across the street is Wood Lane, which is home to some beautiful houses and the Hummingbird Inn bed and breakfast. Soon it was time for the second round, and we watched as 611 once again pushed the train out onto the main line.
Understand, clear 20, 20, J611 over.
Once the switches were set, 611 emerged onto the main line, bound for Staunton once again. Between Goshen and Craigsville, there are some areas where pacing is possible along Virginia Avenue/Road 42. After some attempts at pacing, the next place we got set up at was along Railroad Avenue in Craigsville. This spot was once where the Craigsville Depot once stood, but all that is left of the station is some remains of the old platforms and this sign marking the town's location on the railroad. While 611 was being slowed down by the hill here, thanks to the previous runs, the tracks 611 was running on were much drier than earlier, which meant that 611 was able to go faster than on the previous runs, which we found out when we saw the train once again at the Esterling Valley Road/Road 601 railroad crossing in Augusta Springs. We are now back at the Sears Hill Bridge in Staunton, where we watch as 611 pulls into the station. With the train now at a stop, we'll now watch as 13 and 7 come out of the small Buckingham Branch yard and couple up to the train.
They used to have a big classification yard where like they pump the trains or we did assemble them and all that. I remember watching this video about these Staunton maintenance, and there was talking on the Pacific. There's one particular Pacific that someone tried to save. They raised money to try to save it, but unfortunately, when they were trying to finalize the plan, she went out of town on vacation. Yeah.
With the two diesels now coupled up, number 7 then began the journey back to Goshen. While the weather on the second run was much better than in the morning, unfortunately, when we got back into the mountains, a flash rainstorm popped up. We then caught the train along Railroad Avenue / Road 687 southwest of Craigsville and got to watch as number 7 led the train through the rain. After seeing the train here, we then arrived back along Murray River Road in Goshen and saw the train cross over the Calf Pasture River. After 611 got across the river, we then moved over to the nearby Industrial Spur Railroad crossing on Murray River Road. As 611 was making its way down the Industrial Spur, a CSX grain train then rolled by on the main line, and both trains exchanged whistles. We'll get to see the grain train in about a minute or two. As 611 entered into Victoria Station, this marked the end of yet another day of running the Shenandoah Valley Limited. While this was the end of the day for them, we decided to run over to nearby Clifton Forge, Virginia, to visit yet another place before ending the day. Located in Clifton Forge is the C&O Railway Heritage Center, a museum and visitor center operated by the Chesapeake and Ohio Historical Society. The center houses a number of artifacts and vintage rolling stock from the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway. This also includes Chesapeake and Ohio 614, a J3A Class 484 Greenbrier built by the Lima Locomotive Works in June of 1948. There were only 12 Greenbriers built in 3 batches between 1935 and 1948, with 614 being a part of the last batch. Similar to the J class of the N&W, the Greenbriers were also built to pull the railway's luxurious passenger trains, such as the George Washington, the fast-flying Virginian, and many others. Sadly, 614 only had a service career of only 5 years, being retired in 1953. It stayed in storage in Russell, Kentucky until shockingly 1975, when it was donated to the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad Museum. In 1979, the B&O Railroad Museum traded 614 for Reading Railroad 2101, and 614 was given to Ross Rowland to be restored to operational condition. It then ran many excursion trains across many railways in the east until 1998, when once again it entered into storage. While there were some attempts to run some excursion trains with the Greenbrier during the 2000s, none of them panned out. Eventually, the engine ended up on display here in 2011, after another attempt at running excursion trains went belly up. As of the making of this video, it looks like there is a new lease on life for 614. On November 8, 2024, it was announced that Ross Rowland sold off 614 to a new group called RJT America. The new group intends to once again restore 614 back to operational condition. According to them, 614 will be moved from Clifton Forge, Virginia to the Strasburg Railroad in Pennsylvania for restoration in early 2025. While it is a bit sad to see 614 leave the Heritage Center, it will be nice to see yet another big steamer return to the main line once again. While we were here, we then saw the CSX grain train enter into the yard in town here. This was the same grain train that passed 611 just a little bit ago. Leading the grain train was CSX 961 and 96. CSX 961 is a GE ES44AC-H, built in 2011, and 96 is a GE AC44CW, built in 1995. As the grain train was on the move, behind it was CSX 8851, which was also switching the yard here. Clifton Forge is a division point on CSX, where the James River and Allegheny subs meet. The North Mountain sub also meets here as well, which is the BB's Richmond and Allegheny line. That's the line we've been following 611 on all day. The grain train had left the North Mountain subdivision and will stop here in town to switch crews to continue on to the Allegheny subdivision. CSX 8851 is an EMD ST40-2, built in 1979 for Conrail as their 6492. As soon as 8851 moved into the yard, another engine appeared behind the grain train. It was CSX 820, another ES44 AC-H, built in 2008. With the grain train now at a standstill, we decided now would be a good time to end the day. If you're ever in Clifton Forge, Virginia, I highly recommend a visit to the C&O Heritage Center. Despite 614 leaving, this is still a great place to see many of the artifacts here from the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, especially if you're a C&O fan. Unfortunately, in 2024, due to some issues that had arisen at the Virginia Museum of Transportation, 611 was unable to run in 2024, which also meant the Shenandoah Valley Limited was unable to run as well in 2024. Despite this, if you ever get the chance to see or ride behind 611, I would highly recommend doing so, as 611 is a class act in steam on the East Coast. Trust me, you will not be disappointed.